Welcome, everybody. Today is Wednesday. We're looking at this week's schedule. We're to our review day. Remember, tomorrow is your final. Makeup work is due Friday. We're going to start today with listening to a song called We Didn't Start the Fire. It was a song made in the 80s, and it's talking about a lot of the issues we talked about in this class. So it starts with, the end of World War II. So it starts at the very 1945, 1946. It talks about things like the Cold War and racism and discrimination, but it also talks about like pop culture and economics and um, health issues and all the things that happened through the decades we've been learning about. So we're going to watch this video. Hopefully, you make some connections to things we've learned about, see some pictures you recognize, and we'll just start with listening to this song. You can pause this video while we listen. All right, so your final that's coming up tomorrow, we'll have level 2, level 3, and a level 4 question on it. Just like your competencies, you'll get a choice as to which question you want to answer, and it will be open note as well. So any notes you have, any readings you've kept, any old assignments you have, I'll hand stuff back, all can be used on the final. So our first unit was all about the 1950s, and we talked about the causes of the Cold War, why it happened, what was going on, capitalism versus communism, that stuff. We talked about America's strategy for fighting the Cold War, which was containment, keep communism from spreading. And we talked about the Korean War, as well as how this affected people at home, the Cold War, and the fear that there were communist spies, Red Scare, McCarthyism, things like that. In the 1950s, we also talked about civil rights issues, the Brown versus Board of Education court decision that basically said segregation was illegal and its impact on education with like the Little Rock Nine. Then we talked about Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott and this push to end segregation across the country. We moved on to the 1960s. We talked about the Berlin Wall being built, all the issues with Cuba, the Bay of Pigs invasion, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the embargo. Then we talked about the space race. And then we spent a lot of time talking about Vietnam, the causes of the war, America's justification for getting involved, the impact on troops, protesters at home, the impact on veterans, and the end of the Vietnam War. So we talked about a lot of stuff with Vietnam. For civil rights in the 60s, we were talking about nonviolent resistance. We looked at some major protests like the Birmingham youth protest, the March on Washington, the Selma March. But we also talked about the Black Power movement and Malcolm X and the Black Panthers and their fight for empowerment. And we talked about Chicano civil rights and the West High School blowouts. In the 1970s, we talked about Nixon and the end of Vietnam, Nixon when it came to Watergate and the scandal and the break of trust between the American people and politicians. We talked about the end of the 1970s with Jimmy Carter, the change in the way the Cold War was fought, and how America was kind of taking a step back, and how economically the late 70s were not good for the United States. And then we talked about the Equal Rights Amendment and why it failed. So today you'll have a review sheet to work on. Anything you put on there, anything you think will help you on the final. You can use your Chromebook, your notes, you can ask me a question, all that stuff. As you finish up your review guide, you're welcome to work on makeup assignments, whatever you need to do.